So today I'm going to be taking a look at the Laurier Hyperion. It is Laurier's newest watch, I believe. It's also a GMT, pretty thin, pretty aggressively priced in the market, all things considered. So let's get into the review and see what it's all about. We have a diameter of 38.4, a lug to lug of 47, a height of 10.6, and a lug width of 20 millimeters. Some other general specification for this watch, we're going to have the Soprod C125 GMT movement beating way in here. Mine's currently running about 18 seconds fast a day. Laurier doesn't really state how fast or slow it should be running, and I can't find any kind of official timing from Soprod. It could be better, but honestly it's not too bad. We also have a plexiglass crystal here, slightly domed, plexiglass for the bezel as well, gives that kind of vintage look to it. We have 100 meters of water resistance with a screw down crown. We also have BGW9 on most of the dial elements, and then C3 Superluminova for this GMT hour hand, as well as in the bezel itself. We also have a roulette date wheel, which is fun. We have black and then red for the alternating numerals. And the watch retails for $799 direct from Laurier, and I think about $600 to $650 is a fair price on the secondary market. So moving into the dial of this watch, and I think it's a pretty well executed dial overall. It still has that classic Laurier design language with the kind of handset that has been known to be kind of Laurier's signature by this point. It's featured on all their models and it works on pretty much all of them. We have a very simple layout, just kind of circular lume pips, as well as a 3 and 9 for the rectangular lume pip. We have a nice trapezoidal 6 o'clock date window, a nice triangle at the top, which I think kind of mirrors the trapezoid in kind of shape and design language, which I think is pretty nice. We also have the Laurier logo here, automatic Hyperion GMT. Not too much text by any means. I think it all is well executed. It all looks pretty nice together. Nothing really to complain about there. We can see the GMT hand itself is done in this red coloration. I think it's pretty nice because not only does it stand out against this nice inky black dial, but it also matches the red in the bezel, and it just makes it easier to see, which is always nice. Yeah, not much to say on the dial really. It is well done, it is well executed, it is pretty simple overall. It kind of has a lot going on. It has a date, it has a GMT, but thankfully because of the colors they chose, the fact that they put the date at 6 o'clock, everything seems pretty well balanced, everything seems pretty well executed, and it is just nicely done overall, I think. So zooming in on the dial here and kind of ignoring these slight little scratches that are going to happen because this is a plexiglass crystal, we can see all the Laurier text as well as kind of like the outline for those numerals as well as the seconds track out here is all done in this kind of silver metallic print, which I think is pretty nice. It's a little bit more unique, a little bit more, I guess, intricate than just a plain white dial printing would be. So it is a nice touch, a nice attention to detail there. We can see there is a little bit of fuzziness around the hands, a little bit of speckling as well. They are not perfectly finished by any means, and for this price point I don't expect them to be, but they are, I would say, a little bit rougher than I have seen from some other brands at a similar price point. Overall, whatever coating was used on this GMT hand is very, very well applied, looks good, looks clean, looks uniform. Everything on the dial here is pretty well printed, but kind of more the applied elements like that date window and stuff like that have a little bit of roughness to them. But overall, can't really complain too much. It looks good. I really like this kind of speckled silver look to all the applied white elements here. I think it just looks nice. All the lume is applied relatively uniformly, relatively flatly. So pretty decent job with the dial here. A little bit too much roughness, I would say, on the hands for around $700. It is to be expected again, but it wouldn't hurt to see a little bit nicer finishing. Moving on to the case here, and I think this is another pretty interesting point about the watch. You have that classic Laurier kind of styling and aesthetic to it. It has this very majorly tapered bracelet, which if you've seen any of my other Laurier videos, you know I'm not a fan of. I don't love the way that looks, but a lot of people do like it, so if that's not a problem for you, it's not a problem here. We have mainly brushed surfaces, all vertical brushing on the lug tops here, a nice chamfer along the side. We also have horizontal brushing along the case side, drill lug holes there. A nice kind of gentle curvature to the mid case there, and as you can see, this is a GMT, but it is very, very, very thin. It's going to wear pretty close to the wrist. It's going to wear pretty slimly. There's not even that much of a case back that's protruding there, so it's just really going to sit right onto that wrist, which I think is a really, really nice touch. I didn't expect it to fit as well as it does because I didn't really pay attention to the thickness of the watch, but when I got it in, I was pleasantly surprised, and it is a pleasure to wear. We also have a nice little signed Laurier crown there, decent knurling to the bezel. The bezel is bi-directional. I believe it's like a 47 or 48 click or some weird number like that. A little untraditional, but hey, it is what it is. There is some play in the bezel here. Could be refined a little bit. The bezel, I think the colors they went with look very, very nice. It has a more darker tone. It is very almost serious and mature in its styling. One thing I will note here is that the kind of Super Luminova, the C3 and the BGW9 contrast very extremely. I think if we cover up this blue portion, it looks down here almost like a more Fotina type look, which I'm not too opposed to. I think it looks pretty good. But when we go into this blue portion here, it takes on a very much greener tone, at least in my opinion. And I do not like how that green tone plays with the kind of stark white of the BGW9. I think it contrasts a little too much. I don't like the look of it. I wish they would have went for BGW9 for just everything. It is kind of cool because in the Lume signature, you have two different distinct colors, which kind of helps differentiate the different parts of the watch. But I just would have preferred all kind of a uniform look to it. Or if they would have went for a completely red bezel, I think it would have looked a lot better because, again, it looks almost Fotina versus green here. Moving on to the bracelet really quickly, it is the classic Laurier flat link bracelet. Flat on the top, kind of curved on the underside to wear very smoothly and plainly on the wrist. Have screwed links, as you can see there. Pretty well constructed bracelet, lots and lots of articulation. So it is going to wear really, really well on the wrist. I'm just, again, not a fan of this hugely dramatic taper. It goes from 20 to 16 right there in the first 3 links, which I think is a little too dramatic. I would have preferred a more gentle taper, but a lot of people seem to like this bracelet, and good on them. I just guess it makes me not have to buy a Laurier, which my pocketbook is thankful for. Moving on to the clasp here, we have a very fairly small clasp. I maybe would like to see a little bit bigger just to have a little bit more micro adjust. We have 3 holes though, push button deployant. One thing I will note about this clasp is it's not great. I'm pretty sure it's maybe just my model here, but I'll show you what I mean. There's you can hear that first audible click and it very easily pops off. It doesn't take a lot of force at all. It's very insecure. It will pop off the wrist. So you kind of have to make sure you press it in very, very hard. So there's like a first click, which you hear there, and a second click, there you heard there. So it's a little bit annoying. I'm pretty sure this is just a fault with my bracelet in particular. Kind of sucky to see, especially if you kind of don't have a very heavy touch. I know especially when I put it on the first couple times, I just kind of thought it was on, I was moving around and boom, opened up immediately. So that is a flaw with the bracelet, kind of a, flaw to the watch itself, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of a fluke. It's probably only my model, but unfortunately it is my model, so. Pretty good looking bracelet. I love the design of it. Overall, I love it in theory. I just don't love it on wrist. I don't love this taper. But it is well executed. It is well built. It looks nice. It fits the kind of just aesthetic of the watch, but just not for me. And really quickly before we move on, just we have a nice kind of sized crown here. It has a good knurling, very, very good grip to it. It pops out very securely. I guess it doesn't unscrew in the most smooth fashion, but it is what it is. We have, of course, the first position, which is the date window. As you can see there, the red and black dates, which is pretty fun. I like how the red plays off the red of the bezel. We also have, if you go out to the second position, just regular time telling. And if we go back to the first position but go the opposite way of the date, we have the independently moving GMT hour hand, which technically is not a true GMT because that would mean the hour hand itself jumps, not the GMT hand. But I mean, who really cares? It is still a functional watch. You can still use it as a GMT. You just have to focus your attention on the GMT hand rather than the hour hand for jumping time zones. So moving on to how this watch wears. Earlier, I was wearing this Longines, I believe it's called the Conquest. This is cool, 34 millimeters, not a model you see too often, so really been enjoying wearing this. So here we have the Laurier on my 6.5 inch wrist, and as you can tell, it wears pretty well. Obviously 38.5 millimeters, perfectly sized, fairly short lug to lug, so it sits within the bounds of my wrist pretty well. It is, again, very thin, very sculpted, so it sits nicely onto the wrist itself. It is a very comfortable wearing watch, and I do like the way it looks on my wrist. I like the proportionality of just all the elements on the watch itself. So Laurier did a really, really good job with the design overall here. Again, the bracelet, I don't love the extreme taper, at least the immediate extreme taper, but some people do, and that's cool. So as we can see from the side there, the watch is really just sitting flush to the wrist. It isn't sitting proud in any way. It isn't sitting high at all. And it is a fairly thin watch, all things considered, so it does really just wear pretty nicely. So moving on to some other straps, here we have this distressed leather from Vario. Where is it? There we go. Quick released, really fun, really comfortable straps. Plays really well with the blue of the bezel itself. As you can see here, Laurier does have a little bit of that lug gap. I wish they would move the kind of holes for the lug just a little bit up. It's not a big deal, it's not major, it's not Nomos level gap, but it is there. Here we have it on wrist, a little bit of that lug gap shining through again, but looks good on wrist, that distressed leather making it a little bit more casual, but still dressing it up a little bit more than the bracelet does. Pretty cool combo. Now this was hands down my favorite combo that I came across. This is a nice Oxblood Nato off of Amazon. I'll put a link in the description. I'll probably put a link to all these straps in the description, but this pairs super nicely with the watch, plays well with all the red themes, is a little darker so it almost feels a little bit more serious, but because of it's a NATO, it's still casual, it still wears well. I just really like this combo here. There we go, benchmark straps. There we have it on wrist, takes away that lug gap issue, you don't really notice it anymore. Again, pairs really well with the tones and the colors of the dial, makes the watch sit really nicely on wrist itself. Yeah, really dig this one. Here we have the Harris tweed strap from Crown and Buckle. Really love these straps, nice texture to it, a good feel overall. The gray I think just plays really well with the dial itself. And because it's so thin, adding a kind of thicker NATO-ish doesn't really add much to the watch at all. And there you have it on wrist, adds a little texture to the watch, just looks really nice. That kind of classic gray look, just very color neutral. Yeah, really dig this one. Last but not least, the Archer silicone strap off of Amazon. Because they used BGW9, it pairs really well with the white of the strap. Because they use C3, it does not pair really well with the strap, but hey, it is what it is. Still like this combo. The lug gap makes the kind of spring bars shine through a little bit more, but not too bad. There we have it on wrist, makes the watch pop a little bit more, which I really like. Just looks nice, looks comfortable. I mean, is comfortable, really. Yeah, I mean, if you've never tried one of these straps, try one. If you do regret it, it's only like 12 bucks, so it won't break the bank. So here we have the Laurier all loomed up. And as you can see, I think the lume is applied really well here. We do have, again, that green signature around the bezel, that also green in that GMT hour hand there, but blue for everything else because it's BGW9. Overall, the lume is applied kind of decently. It doesn't glow forever, as you know, most lume doesn't, but while it does glow, it is bright, it is legible, it is very legible, but as you can see, bezel already dying out pretty well there. It could be applied better, but no complaints overall. Reluming it and comparing to my classic Timex Snoopy here, we can see, of course, Timex looking a little bit brighter just because it has a little bit more area. The Laurier, again, the bezel dies out pretty fast overall, but the lume is still decently applied. You will be able to read it, no doubt, and not too bad. Could be a little bit thicker, but no complaints. So pros and cons of this watch, and I think the first pro kind of just has to be the price. This is $799 retail from Laurier directly, and again, maybe $600, $650, $700 for a really good example on the used market. And for that price, you're getting a GMT movement, you're getting a very thin movement, pretty good ergonomic case, decently made watch, you know, as long as you like all the design cues. And, you know, for the money, you're getting a beautifully made watch, a beautiful looking watch, and kind of great value for money, all things considered. I mean, you know, Baltic has their C125 GMT that they recently came out with, and I believe that retails for around $1,200. So the Laurier at $800 is a pretty good deal in my opinion. The next pro for the Laurier will, I think, be just the design of it. It is well designed. I think the colors on the bezel look amazing. The overall layout of the dial is really nice. The kind of just case shape, the ergonomics of it, how thin it is, it all works really, really well together. And also just kind of bouncing off that, the size. I mean, at 38.5 millimeters, pretty short lug to lug, all things considered. It wears amazingly, it looks pretty good. It's nice to just see more watches under 40. It's always something I love seeing. And yeah, I really like the fit of this watch. It fits well, it fits close to the wrist. It is, again, a very, very thin watch, considering it has a GMT movement in it, which is kind of something that a lot of companies pay attention to. If they put a GMT in it, they're like, it's going to be thicker. But here with Laurier, they made it still very, very thin, very, very wearable, and it looks good on wrist. So moving on to the cons, I think one of the biggest ones for me is just going to be the different looms used. They used both BGW9 and C3 Superluminova. I just honestly don't like C3 in almost any application. It always leans very, very green, and I just prefer that pure white tone. It looks cleaner, it looks better, it looks more modern. Again, I thought the kind of C3 within the red part of the bezel looked really nice. In the blue, not so much, and then as a whole, I just don't like the way it looks. So that's just going to be a con for me. Also a con, this is kind of just my personal opinion, the bracelet, I just don't like the look of it. I think it tapers too aggressively, it makes the watch head feel off balanced, it makes it feel just kind of has very thin legs on a thick body in a way, you know? So I just don't like the look of it. I just feel like if they would have made it a less aggressive taper, it would have tied the design in a little bit better. Plenty of people praise the bracelet, plenty of people like the bracelet, so I guess I'm kind of in the minority here. But again, that's just my opinion. I don't love it. It's still well made, besides my model with the clasp issue, but you know, every once in a while you get a dud. So my final con is going to be the lug gap on the watch. It is there, it is present, it is not as bad as, let's say, a Nomos Club, but you still get it. I love putting other straps on my watches. I love just playing with different combos, and when there is kind of like a lug gap between, you know, the strap and the case, it loses that cohesiveness to me. It loses some continuity of just design language. Maybe you don't feel the same way. I just personally feel that way, and it kind of just detracts from the overall feel of the watch to me. If everything else was perfect on the watch, this lug gap would keep me from kind of owning it. It'd keep me from keeping it. So that's just my opinion. You may feel differently. Final thoughts on the Laurier. It is, like all the other Lauriers, a great watch. It is good value for money. It is greatly designed, but there are just some things you have to be aware of. Are you going to be okay with that C3 and BGW9 split of the Lume? Are you going to be okay with the aggressive taper? I'm not. So I that's why I just don't buy Lauriers anymore, except to review. It is a great watch otherwise. It looks nice, it is well priced. You're not really gonna find, especially this thin of a GMT in this price point. So all things considered, if you love the look, if you're looking for a GMT, if you are fine with every other design element on the watch that I'm not fine with, I would totally say buy this watch. It is gonna be a good watch to have. It will look great. It is a quality looking piece. So you really can't go wrong as long as you like it. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in another one.